All right, so the clock has hit noon, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with today's session. So first off, I would like to thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be talking about how beeswax is made, and I have a couple things here to show you. And the replays for all of the lunch and learns except the first one that I forgot to hit record on. They are available on our YouTube channel, so I put a link to that in the chat. We did 2 weeks ago, we did the anatomy of a beehive, so I took a hive apart and we took a look at what's inside. And last week we did the life cycles of bees. So if you want to take a look at those are available on YouTube. And if you have any content suggestions, so if you have a thought about what you would like me to talk about, feel free to put your ideas in the chat. And if you have any questions today as we get going, feel free to put those in the chat as well. So welcome, and Katie's here. Welcome, Katie. Now we'll just have a couple more people joining. So as I mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will go ahead and get started. So beeswax, I brought a 1 pound block with here today. So this is what we normally think of when we think of beeswax. I'll put a little closer so you can see the color. It's that beautiful yellow color. And a fun fact about beeswax, you can get beeswax in many different colors, from white all the way to dark brown. And there are different reasons for that. But this wax, it's in a great form to make candles, bath and body products. But the question is, where does it actually come from? And it's something I have wanted to see in real life, but unfortunately I haven't had a chance to experience it. So I did some hunting and found a picture. So I'm going to share my screen. And in this picture, we see a worker bee. And I've outlined in the red circle, there's these little flakes on there. And those are coming from wax glands on the bee's abdomen. So the worker bees produce the beeswax from 8 different wax glands. And these small flakes of fresh beeswax, they're about 3 millimeters across and 1 millimeter thick. So they're very, very small. And it takes about 1,100 of these tiny flakes to make 1 gram of beeswax. And what the bees do, they secrete this wax from their wax glands, and they're going to chew it up and mold it, and they're going to create their honeycomb. So I have some honeycomb here. I'm going to bring it out again. Again to show you, but I'll show you on the small screen for now. So we've got a little bit of honeycomb here. And the bees are going to mold those and create that beautiful hexagon structure we see in the in the beehive. And in that, they store their honey, the pollen, they raise their broods in the honeycomb. So we end up, this one, when I show it to you on the big screen again, it's kind of dark. However, let's see if I can change to the next slide. Here we go. So, whoops, go back. If you see down on the bottom, again, I outlined it in red. So these are fresh flakes of wax, and they're actually colorless. They're very, very pale white to colorless when they're first created by the bees. So then the question comes up, well, something like this yellow beeswax, why is it yellow? So as the bees are working in the beehive, they will, they're tracking a little bit of dirt in there, there's pollen in there. As the brood grows and develops, there's the casings from when they're, as they go through their life cycle, those get left behind, and the bees do a really good job of cleaning their hives out. But over time, the wax will start to darken. So we start with this beautiful colorless white wax, and I do have an example of some fresh comb to show you. Hopefully the color will come across on the screen. And that builds up over time. And then when you get to the point where you're ready to use the wax, so it comes out of the hive, you can turn something that's very dark into, you can go all the way to white if you want. So this is kind of cool. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the other things in this picture. So just to the left of those little flakes of wax, there's a bee wing there. And above that, they're the yellow things. Those are pollen. And I can't see what this other thing is over here. I think these are all pollen on the top row. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, that is a varroa mite. Those are... They're not very nice creatures. They can cause wing deformities in the bees, and that's one of the things as a beekeeper I keep an eye out for, and we do have to treat for those if we find them. We don't want them to overwhelm the population. However, that said, I was reading something very interesting about the varroa mites, and the bees, the Asian honeybees, have developed a way to live in harmony basically with the varroa mites, whereas the European honeybees, those are the ones that I work with, and they have more of a challenge working with the varroa mite. So as we're developing our beehives, we want to look for, they found that bees that exhibit hygienic behavior, they are able to adapt to living with the varroa mite a little bit better. So it's kind of interesting, the different types of bees from different types in the different places in the world, and how they react to this little varroa mite. But that's not the topic today. So I'm going to stop the share now. I just had 2 slides. I wanted to share those pictures with you, and now we'll get to the good stuff. So when the comb is first made, I have a jar here. Let's see if we can get the lighting in there. So this comb is pretty sticky. It is full of honey. Let's see if I can pull a piece out of here, and we'll bring it into the camera. So this is a fairly light colored wax. This is a newer wax, so there hasn't been much happening in these cells. And this is actually full of honey, so it's super sticky right now. So in this comb, we've got a combination of the beeswax and also the honey. And it's a little squished, so that nice hexagon form isn't, it's a little bit hard to see in here. So that's a newer comb. And then this is the one I was showing on the video earlier. So this one is pretty much empty. There's a little bit of honey in here. But this one is an older comb, and you can see how the color is quite different. It's a lot darker. And there's nothing really interesting in here that you'll be able to see on camera. But this is this comb, I think, was perhaps used for brood, and they haven't filled it up. So this wax here, if I were to render it to make it into something I could use for candle making or bath and body products, what I would do with this is melt it down, and there's going to be all sorts of detritus that's in there, so I'll have to filter that out. And that's one of the big things about beeswax that I really like. There are other natural waxes out there. You get your palm wax, your soy wax. However, the environmental impact of those waxes is much more significant, because you start with the plant matter, and you have to go through a manufacturing process to change it into the wax. Whereas beeswax, it's a lot simpler process. So basically we're filtering out the impurities, and then it's ready to use. So the environmental impact on that, it's much lower than some of the other natural waxes available. So once we filter this wax. So this is kind of a brown color. And once I filter that down, I've done wax rendering once, and my wax wasn't that dirty, so I didn't get the major color change. But you will end up with this something like this yellow color. This seems to be the color that comes from the wax that I've seen in Alberta. So any of the honeycomb I've seen in Alberta, this is tends to be the color. It varies a little bit, different shades of the yellow, but it does tend to go to this beautiful yellow color. And basically what you do is you pour the wax through some kind of sieve. So cheesecloth works well. I use paper towel with mine. That's all I had available when I was in my workshop experimenting that day. So basically what I did is I poured the melted wax into the paper towel and let it drip through, and I filtered it a few times, and then it was clean enough for me to make into candles. And I have a book, I can't remember the name of the book. He goes through the filtration process, and if you're doing any bigger scale rendering of the wax, there's a process you go through to wash the honey out and get the big debris out, and then you refine it. Your filter gets progressively smaller as you're filtering out those particles. And there's also another type of beeswax available that goes even lighter than this, and that is the white beeswax. And white beeswax goes through an extra step. You can go through a charcoal filtration process, and in that process the pollen is removed from the beeswax and you get that nice white color. You can also sun bleach it. It takes a while. I haven't tried sun bleaching, but I've heard it takes a while to get the wax bleached to the white. And the third method I know of is chemical filtration. So basically they use chemicals to get all of the pollen and everything out. So the wax that I use, I like to look for the charcoal filtered white beeswax, just to make sure it's not changing that very essential structure to the beeswax. So that's about all I had. Today was going to be a nice and quick topic. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. If you want to see anything again, I can pull it up and we can take a closer look. And yeah, I would like to thank you guys for coming today. So I'll open it up to any questions. So are beeswax pellets usually as environmentally friendly as the blocks? I think it will depend on how they're made. For me, when I buy my wax, I buy it in big 42-pound blocks, so they're very large. And how those are made, when the wax is going to be, this is from larger companies that have way more hives than I do, so they're doing the wax on a large scale and they're putting them into these giant molds. And then what I do is I take the big blocks, and I have a melter. It holds about 100 liters of beeswax. It's a water jacketed melter, and I put the giant blocks in there, and basically I turn the tap on and refill into smaller molds. The pellets I've seen, I have tried to make them, and they are kind of a pain to make. I was reading a little bit about how they make, I don't know if they still make them this way or if it was something they did in the past, but to make bullets, what they would do is they would drop molten metal from a certain height into water. And what happens as it's falling, it forms the shape of the bullet, and when it hits the water, that helps form the shape of the bullet. And you can use a similar method, and this is the method I was testing out, to make the pellets. So basically what I would do is turn on the tap so it was dripping out into basically a dish of water, and then I'd scoop the pellets out, let them dry off, and then use them in projects. So you can get machinery that will do the pelleting. I think they're called pelletizers, and those, I guess it depends how much electricity they're using as to how environmentally friendly they would be and whether they're any more environmentally friendly than the blocks. I personally think it would be a toss-up. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of interesting to see the way they're formed. And to do it without the proper equipment, it does take a long time. I've had the melter running, I think I let it run overnight, dripping, to see how many pellets I'd get, and I got maybe a couple tablespoons. So that the energy of heating up the wax, keeping it warm, keeping the melter on for that much, at the end of the day, it's probably not very efficient. But the pelletizers, they might be a little more efficient. So do we have any other questions? And I guess as an aside to that as well, you can use smaller molds. So you can take a big block, like these 1 pound blocks, and pour them into an ice cube tray if you want something a little bit smaller. And those, again, if you're just pouring into an ice cube tray, it'll take much less time than to drip it piece by piece into the water. What are the other types of filtering? So what type of filtering are you talking about? Is it when we're in the rendering process? Oh, the charcoal is best. Okay. So the different types, there's 3 different types that I know of. So you would start with a yellow beeswax. And the first one is the chemical filtration. I don't know exactly how that works, but I think they run the beeswax through some kind of chemical. I don't even know how it would work. If they might add chemicals and that dissolves the pollen or something. I'm not 100% sure how that works. I saw that it was a chemical filtration, and I wasn't interested in learning more about it. The second type is sun bleaching. So that's basically you take your wax, stick it out in the sun, and let the sun bleach it. And then the charcoal filtration, I think that's a little bit quicker. The sun bleaching takes time. So we have the chemical, charcoal filtering, and sun bleaching. Okay, so I think we will call it a day. Thank you so much for joining me. I will have the replay of this up on YouTube later. I put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat. And I hope you're able to join me next week. I'm going to be talking about honey. And I've got a few different colors of honey, and I'll go over why we get the different colors, how we get the different flavors, and some interesting facts around that. So I'm pretty excited about that. If you have any topic suggestions you want me to talk about, feel free to let me know. You can email me at info@yycwax.com or connect on any of our social media channels. Instagram and Twitter, YYCWax, Facebook, YYC Beeswax. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it for today. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you learned something, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.